What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Well, it's time for your Arkansas versus Ole Miss primer. This is a game that's been close a lot lately. The past 9 years, there's been 5 games decided by 4 points or less. I think 3 of those have been 1-point games. So a really intriguing matchup. We're going to bring in David Johnson with Inside the Rebels to help us get a better understanding of the 2023 version of Ole Miss. And we're going to bring in Curtis Wilkerson also to get his thoughts on the game and as well talk about a little red-white showcase and a recent commitment. All that and more in today's episode of Hog Sports Live. Well, before we get started, I want to let everybody know that today is the last day to sign up for our 2 months for $1 special at Hog Sports. It breaks down to obviously 50 cents a month. That's a pretty good deal. And it's billed at just $1 for the first 2 months. It's 11 cents a week. 1.6 cents a day if you want to get all the way down to that level. So if you want to get unparalleled insider Razorback coverage from the #1 independent source on Arkansas sports and recruiting, sign up at HawgSports. That's HawgSports.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. You'll be glad you did. A lot of stuff going on. It's not long for the transfer portal window opens. Obviously, we've already started some basketball stuff. It'll get in full swing in November, but we've got all the preseason stuff going on now, of course, starting with the Red-White Showcase. So a lot of great content over at Hog Sports. And, of course, it's football season. No matter how disappointed you are, it's still football season. There's still a lot going on, and we're just right now in the middle of the season. All right. Arkansas and Ole Miss. Arkansas is 2-3, 0-2 in the SEC. Ole Miss is 4-1, 1-1 in the SEC. They kick off at 6:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time on Saturday in Oxford, in a game being televised by the SEC Network. This back-to-back weeks that Arkansas is playing an SEC Network game. Last week was obviously the 11 o'clock game. This is Ole Miss's second night game. I think they were at 6 o'clock against LSU. So Arkansas owns a 38-28-1 edge in the all-time series, depending on which school you go by. I think Ole Miss has them 38-29-1. But Arkansas, there's a dispute somewhere in there. They may also include the 2 games that were vacated in 2012 and 2013 when Ole Miss was caught cheating during a couple of Hugh Freeze scandals there. Ole Miss is 8-6 all-time against Arkansas in Oxford. Arkansas is 6-3 against Ole Miss in the last 9 meetings before those 2 games were vacated. 5 games, as I mentioned, decided by 4 points or less during that time frame. And last year, of course, Arkansas jumped out to a 42-6 lead in Fayetteville. And then they kind of coasted the rest of the way. Gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter. 42-27 was the final. 3 of those last 8 games that I mentioned have been decided by 1 point. That includes the Hunter Henry Heave back in 2015. Arkansas is 2-1 in these 1-point games. A lot of people expecting a lot of points in this one, obviously, despite how bad Arkansas's offense played last weekend. Ole Miss put up a lot of points against LSU, and I think the general consensus of most Arkansas fans is that Arkansas is going to need to put up some points to win this. Probably not going to be a defensive struggle. If you're struggling with your internet service, you should call my friends at Ozarks Go. You can reach them at ozarksgo.net/hog. That's HAWG. When you search for them, when you go to the internet site, put that HAWG in so they know you came from here. You can reach them at 479-684-4900 and talk to somebody local because this is a local company. I've had these guys for 2.5 years, and they do a fantastic job. I don't have any outages. I don't have to unplug and replug the router over and over again. It just works. It's always worked. I mean, what do you want better than that? They're going to give you a low rate. They're not going to give you some discounted rate and then jack your prices up year after year. You're going to pay the same this year as you pay next year. Then you're not going to call and say, hey, I want to cancel. Well, we'll drop your price by $40. None of that stuff. You're just going to get a great rate. I use the Multigig, 2,500 megabits per second. It's lightning fast. Gigabit, I think, is good for most people unless you're like me and you use a ton of internet. Obviously, I work in that area. So, but for most people, multi-gig is fine. They offer several different tiers. But give them a call, 479-684-4900. Available pretty much north of the tunnel on into Missouri and Oklahoma. They're getting a foothold in Rogers now also. So go check out our friends at ozarksgo.net/hog. The line in this game. I was just looking recently. I looked yesterday on Bet Saracen, and the line was 10.5, I think, the last show, and it's already gone up to 11.5. So right now, yeah, Arkansas is plus 11.5 if you like that action. There's also some prop bets on there too. And plus 325 if you like Hogs in the money line, and the over-under is 63.5 on the Bet Saracen app. You know, you look at this team, Ole Miss, they're number one in the SEC in scoring offense, 44.6 points per game. Total offense, they're number 2 at 517.4. They love to run the ball, even though everybody talks about their passing, 336.6 yards per game passing, 180.8 yards per game rushing. Obviously, we saw Quinshon Judkins in the last game really break loose for the first time. But you know, I think it's an interesting deal with Jackson Dart because they brought in Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State, who Oklahoma State could use right now to compete with him. I guess they thought maybe he'd win the job. They also brought in Walker Howard, who was a former top 50 prospect who committed to LSU out of high school in the class of 2022. Those guys pushing Jackson Dart, and part of the reason maybe that he's elevated his game so much. In 2023, so far, Jackson Dart, who transferred from USC in 2022. He's completed 91 of 142 passes for 64.1% for 1,483 yards, 85 yards, with 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He has a 174.7 efficiency rating. Last year, in the same number of games, with a softer schedule, they didn't play at Tulane, who was 24th at the time. They didn't play Alabama already and LSU already last year. I mean, they also played Georgia Tech this year. Is that right? But last year they didn't have near the schedule that they have this year. And last year at this time, he was 66 of 105 for 62.9%, 910 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 145.7 efficiency rating. And just because last year in this matchup, he went 21 of 36 for 240 with a touchdown and an interception, he also had 44 yards rushing. It doesn't mean that Arkansas just has his number, because if you look what he did against LSU last year when they lost 45-20, he had 283 yards with an interception in that game, no touchdowns. Last weekend, he completed 67% of his passes, 389 yards, had over 100 yards more passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they won 55-49. Jackson Dart's playing at a different level, and he hasn't had Quinshon Judkins until just this last game to really be Quinshon Judkins like he had him last year. That just tells you how much he's taken up his game to another level. Trey Harris is a big play guy. Guy's got 6 touchdowns already. Doesn't have a lot of catches, doesn't have a ton of catches. They don't have Mingo. They don't have Heath. Those guys both are on NFL rosters right now, but they've got plenty of other guys that have stepped up, obviously, as you can tell by these numbers. That's another thing that makes it impressive. He lost 2 NFL wide receivers and is playing this much better. You know, the offensive line, I've heard so much talk about, well, Arkansas doesn't have this on the offensive line. They don't have these 4-star, top 100 guys on the offensive line and all this stuff. Look at Ole Miss's offensive line. They've got guys that have played a lot of snaps for them, but there's guys that are ranked 1,200 nationally in 2021. Another guy that's ranked in the thousands nationally. Caleb Warren was 1,140 nationally. Pettis, the right tackle, everybody's talking about 6'7", 360. He was a mid-range 3-star recruit. I mean, they got 3 guys back. They added two players, Victor Kern, number 649 nationally in 2018. I think he went to Washington. Quincy McGee, number 91 ranked JUCO. I mean, barely a 3-star. Was a 2-star as a high school recruit. I mean, this is their offensive line, and they're doing a good job protecting. They're not a bunch of first-rounders. They're just protecting well, and they're run blocking well. You don't have to have like this one first-rounder after another on your offensive line to have an effective offense and have some protection. I give you example A, B, C, D, E, F. No, there's not an F. A, B, C, D, E. As I talked about Quinshon Judkins, against common opponents so far this year, he's not playing as well. He's 69 carries for 344 yards. It's a 4.9 average. Last year it was 70 for 429, a 6.1 average. So not doing as well, but he exploded last game. And they say he's like finally healthy too. So of course he is. Of course he gets healthy right before Arkansas. Arkansas's got their work cut out of them. They're going to have to put up some points. Obviously, this is a homecoming game for KJ Jefferson, who's from Sardis, which is right by Oxford, was recruited by Ole Miss. Some people say they kind of drug their feet a little bit recruiting him. Judkins ran for 1,567 yards last season, 16 touchdowns. First team All-SEC back with Rocket Sanders. Looking at the defense real quick for Ole Miss, they're allowing, let's see, that's 2022. 2023, Ole Miss is allowing 24.6 points per game. That's ninth in the SEC. Their total defense, 408.8, which is tied for 11th in the SEC. So nothing spectacular about these defensive numbers. Does that tell the whole story about Ole Miss? They certainly put up a lot of offense. Their pass defense, 13th in the SEC, giving up 263.8 yards per game. Their run defense, 12th, 145 yards per game. So, I mean, that would lend you to believe that Arkansas could probably do some stuff. However, again, consider they have played Alabama, LSU, Tulane. I think Georgia Tech, I think that was this year, right? I mean, they played a pretty tough schedule, their opening 5 games. So keep that in mind. KJ Jefferson, when you look at what he did last year against Ole Miss, he was 17 of 22 for 168, 3 touchdowns, also had 47 rushing yards. I mean, this is a game, again, where Arkansas just jumped out so far ahead of these guys so quickly. You go back to 2021, and it may have been Jefferson's best game as a Hog, probably his best road game, 25 of 35, that's 71.4%, for 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 20 carries in that game for 85 yards and 3 touchdowns. He accounted for 6 touchdowns in that game. Okay, let's go over to Curtis now. Curtis Wilkerson. Curtis has been a busy man. He's headed out to Oxford this week. It'll be Andrew and Curtis in Oxford this week, so I'm not going to be there, so I'll be doing a walk and talk locally. Those guys are going to cover things today or Saturday in Oxford.
Hey, Trey.
Hey, Curtis. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. You looking forward to your trip to Oxford?
I am. I wish it was under better circumstances, maybe a 3-game winning streak instead of a losing streak. But no, I'm excited to get down there. It should be a really fun time.
Hey, before we jump into some of the football stuff, let's start with basketball. Obviously, we got to talk about the red-white. But before that, Arkansas just got a commitment from Isaiah Elohim, a top 50 prospect, top 50 wing, and it's a nice commitment, second commitment in the class of 2024. What do you know about this guy?
Yeah, it's a big time get. I'm really excited about Isaiah. He's probably, I mean, you don't like to play favorites, but he's probably one of my favorites of recruits that I've covered. Just really, really nice kid, always responsive, always respectful. I really like this kid a lot. I mean, he's got a strong frame. For a high school kid, he's very physical, explosive, a downhill driver, a guy that can really finish with authority above the rim. I think he's going to be a really exciting player for Arkansas. And, this is a guy who was a top 5 prospect in the country before he had a knee injury, prior to his junior season. So, I mean, the talent there is high level. He plays at a great program at Sierra Canyon. He was teammates with Bronny James over there last season. So plays in a good program, has a college-ready frame, has a lot of talent. I think it's a really good pickup for Arkansas. I mean, when you beat out Kansas and Villanova for a recruit, that's pretty good company to keep there. Yeah. So, with him and Jalen Shelley on board now for the 2024 class, I checked, and Arkansas is up to 14th in the country in the team rankings. So they're moving on up.
Yeah, you can only take big-time high school recruits in the portal era these days. This kid's ranked number 38 nationally on the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 11 small forward, and number 5 overall prospect in California. And as you mentioned, Kansas and Villanova. And it wasn't just like Kansas and Villanova were the other schools. Like, he took official visits there to both of those places. So, when somebody takes a visit like that in hoops, that it's a real pursuit there.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, he was a guy who's recruited heavily by a lot of other schools. I know USC was trying to get him in for a visit there. They were all over him. Providence, another program on the rise. So yeah, this is a really good pickup for Arkansas. I think he's going to be a good one. And a guy, who could potentially come in and make an early impact for him next year.
Yeah. So, Curtis, flipping over to the Red-White Showcase that was last night in historic Barnhill Arena, I had picked the White to win. I didn't know Caleb Battle obviously got banged up a little bit. Otherwise, I think I would have been right. But, we got some real problems for the White team or what? 88, 70? What are they going to do?
Yeah, I think they got fatigued there down the stretch. It was tied at halftime. I think it was 41-41 at halftime, and then it just, the floodgates kind of opened up, and there was a lot of offense, maybe not too much defense, which I'm not really surprised about. They're a month away from the season, so they don't have their game legs yet. Muss has talked about their conditioning quite a bit, but man, it was a really good time. It was good to get out there and see those guys compete. I think my biggest takeaway was probably the 3-point shooting. They were 14 of 28, the two teams combined from three. And I get it. You take these kind of exhibitions with a grain of salt, but man, if we were sitting around waiting on last year's team to make 14 threes, we'd still be in Barnhill Arena. So I think it was good to see, Jeremiah Davenport, Joseph Pinion, those two guys were just absolutely filling it up. And they got some stuff to work on, in other areas of their game. But man, what they bring to the floor in terms of being able to space it and stretch it and knock down perimeter jumpers, that's it's just a dynamic that Arkansas really just hasn't had the last couple of years. So really impressed with those guys. El Ellis, I thought really stood out at the point guard position, gets into the lane whenever he wants. I think it was 6 assists to 1 turnover. So a lot of really promising stuff there. They got some things to work on, but, they did this red-white game about 2 weeks earlier than they normally do. So I think given that, pretty impressed with where they are at this stage.
Curtis Wilkerson joining us. Again, you can follow him at Kurt Wilkerson _ on Twitter. He's the HawgSports senior analyst and does a little bit of everything for us. Real quick before we move on to football, Battle, his injury, he's kind of my guy. I love watching Caleb Battle highlights. Is he going to be okay? And Trevon Brazile, I believe you said that was just kind of just holding him out. Why risk it? Anything else on the injury front that you can share with us there?
Yeah, still haven't heard another update on Battle yet this morning. I've been checking in on that. It was a weird deal. He was out there. Apparently, he practiced earlier in the day. He was out there for warm-ups for the red-white game. Looked like he was ready to go. And then I just happened to turn my head to the left, and he was just walking really gingerly off the floor. And so I didn't know if he had turned an ankle or what was going on, but then he came back out with crutches and a boot. And it turns out, Muss said that his foot was really sore, something that had been bothering him. It sounds like they did some preliminary scans and had him meet with a couple team doctors last night. And they didn't find anything then, but they want to do some follow-ups today. So we're kind of waiting to hear on that. And I'm with you. I really like Battle a lot. I think he's going to be a big piece for this team. So, fingers crossed that we get some good news there at some point, hopefully today or in the near future. And then, yeah, with Brazile, no surprise that he didn't play last night. He's been cleared. Sounds like he's kind of passed all of his testing and the things that they're looking for. But they've got the luxury of time. Again, they're a month out from the regular season. They've got their eyes on having him ready to roll when it matters the most. Muss said he probably could have played 3 to 5 minutes per half last night, but why risk it? So they're going to keep kind of working him back. He's been doing a lot more 3-on-3 stuff. And they'll just kind of build him up and progress. And we'll see if he plays in these exhibitions in the next couple of weeks. But, last night said, hey, as things are going right now, he's good to go for opening night. So, yeah, no cause for concern with TB.
Good deal. All right, flipping you over to football, Curtis. Always our keys to victory, 4 out of the 5 are turnovers, penalties, special teams, and injuries. I like where you went with the 5th one this week, build early confidence. I can remember sitting there in Baton Rouge thinking, just weather the storm, and that's what you have to do on the road environment.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's just important for so many reasons, for this team right now. And, you're on a 3-game losing streak and you like to erase those things and say every game takes on its own identity. But, things start going south early on, you start to get some of those memories creeping back in. Build some confidence, man. And to me, that doesn't mean that Arkansas has to go out there and score right away or have a big play right away, but just settle into the game a little bit. And, especially with some of the changes they have on the offensive line, they're going to have a new look out there at tight end. So just getting those guys settled into the road environment. And then, we know Ole Miss is explosive on offense. Arkansas has kind of struggled on that front lately. So the last thing you want to do, on the road, playing a ranked team that can really score in bunches is be playing from behind. So, get out there, get confident, and get off to a good start, settle in. And, you never know. This has been a wild series. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's kind of your first two questions you can kind of be combined on the burning questions. Can Arkansas's anemic offense keep up in Oxford? And at the same time, can the Razorback defense slow down the lane train?
Yeah, and you know what? I do think Arkansas is going to find more success offensively. And who knows? Is that going to be a product of, Ole Miss not being as good on the defensive side of the ball as Texas A&M? Maybe, or maybe some of these changes they're going to have is going to have an impact for them, in a positive direction. But they're going to have to score some points to keep up and to win this game. And then obviously, we know Lane Kiffin's a great play caller. I wonder about just his tempo and how that's going to impact Arkansas. That's challenging to keep up with, and it's a Razorback defense that had gone on a pretty long string there of not being able to get off the field unless they got a turnover. And so they're going to have to be able to come up with some stops. And obviously they could, benefit from creating some turnovers and takeaways. They've been pretty good at that, but you got to get off the field. And so we'll see what happens there. But I don't know, man. I don't know what to expect this weekend. I really don't.
Yeah. It all kind of comes down to, for Arkansas, if they can protect. Everybody points to all these problems that Arkansas has, but the offensive line has not been very good, and we know that they've shaken up a lot of things, obviously, with Curtis to center, Latham to tackle, Lemmer to guard. It's been quite a bit of shakeup, so that's obviously got to work out. But, that's a big question for everybody. We're not going to go over this too much because we're running out of time. But obviously, Rocket Sanders, we saw a little bit of a glimpse with him Saturday. The reports seem to be, Pittman seems to think he's going to be better this week than he was last week. What do you think?
I think so. I hope so. Anytime you kind of get out there and shake out some rust, you would expect, as long as you're still feeling good from an injury recovery standpoint, that you'd be able to take a step forward in your next outing. Again, it depends on, if he's getting the blocks that he needs. But I think Pittman brought up a good point when he was saying they need to, their running backs to start making guys miss a little bit more. And, Rocket's a guy that can do that. And I did think, I agree, he looked rusty, but he showed some flashes. He had that big screen play that he broke off a pretty good gain on. And then a couple of those runs, it kind of felt like he was a shoestring away from getting some pretty big gains. So maybe just a little more confident and assertive. Maybe he's not thinking about that knee like he was last week, and he can break some off there, because it's interesting. This was supposed to be a matchup between, the two top backs in the SEC, maybe the country, between him and Judkins. And, Judkins started slow. He had his breakout performance last week. Maybe it's Rocket's time to shine. They could certainly use it.
We always talk about letting go of the rope, and Arkansas's, it's 3 straight losses. And if they lose this one, it's 4. And then there's Alabama coming up next.
Yeah.
You think there's fight left in this team?
I think there is. And, I really do. I think they're going to go out and play hard and be motivated. I don't know if that's going to, lead to a victory. It's hard to say. We knew coming into the season that this 4-game stretch here was going to be really, really tough on them no matter what.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think that's why it's important for him to get off to a decent start and build some confidence early, because, when things are going wrong, if you come out there and you fall flat or make some mistakes or get behind early, you wonder about it snowballing. And that's not just over the course of this game, but moving forward, because like you said, man, next week's not going to be any easier for them. I think they've got fight left in them. I hope they do. We'll see what happens Saturday. It's it just feels like every game is getting bigger and bigger in terms of the big picture for this program.
Yeah. All right, Curtis. Appreciate you, brother.
Yep, anytime.
All right, everybody. That's Kurt Wilkerson. Again, you can follow him at @KurtWilkerson_. He's a HawgSports senior analyst. Does a great job for us over at HawgSports.com. I'm going to flip it over to David Johnson now. David is with Inside the Rebels. He's the publisher over there. Does a great job and has been on the show a number of times with us so far, the last 4 years or so.
Hey, guys.
How's it going, David?
Going great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good over here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I hope you're doing well. David, I don't want to waste any of your time. We'll just jump right into it. I've already given you a nice little introduction here, publisher of Inside the Rebels. You do a great job over there with our Ole Miss site on 24/7 Sports Network. But I didn't want to stray too far from some of the questions I asked you earlier in the week. If you could just start off filling us in a little bit about the Ole Miss injury report, any suspensions, anything that you can help us out with there.
Yeah, no suspensions. Probably the biggest news in regards to that is that there have been a couple of guys that have left the team. One being linebacker Reginald Hughes, and the other tight end Michael Trigg. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, Trigg is the guy who transferred in from USC with Jackson Dart.
Yes.
And, things just didn't work out for Michael Trigg here. Ole Miss went in the portal over the offseason and brought in Caden Priestcorn from Memphis. And Caden is kind of, he's back healthy now after having foot surgery during fall camp. And, he's kind of taken over that number one tight end role, and Kyron Heath, the kid from Texas, has emerged. So Michael Trigg really just never kind of found a role here in Oxford, and neither did Reginald Hughes. So both of those guys have left the roster. I expect they'll both be in the transfer portal pretty soon.
Yeah. Jackson Dart, when you look at the numbers that he's put up through 5 games, really against stiffer competition than he had last year. He's 174 efficiency rating. He was like 145 at the same stage last year. But when you also factor in that Heath and Mingo aren't there, they're in the NFL, and Judkins, until last game, hadn't really been the Quinshon Judkins we've been used to seeing, I think it makes it even more impressive, the job that he's done so far for Ole Miss.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And then you factor in, Lane Kiffin brought in a guy through the transfer portal and Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State to really kind of take Jackson Dart's job. Mm-hmm. And, that didn't happen. And we watched it closely in the spring. Of course, Sanders dealt with some arm injuries, shoulder injuries, but he just never clicked. And Jackson, whether or not he took the push as extra motivation, I mean, he's looked as good in practices as he has in the games ever since spring ball. And, there was never a doubt in our mind that, Jackson Dart was going to keep his job. And I'm not surprised at all at what he's done so far this season. If you watch him play, he's much more comfortable in Lane Kiffin's offense. He's more comfortable in his own skin, if you will. Mm-hmm. He is a true on-the-field leader. He's a take-charge quarterback, and that's what Ole Miss has benefited from thus far this season.
David Johnson joining us. Yeah, I remember hearing you on the Cover 3 pod. I listened to all the summer school stuff so to kind of get an insight from all the publishers on the upcoming opponents. And, replacing Heath and Mingo, you have Watkins and Wade, who were there last year and have obviously stepped up to a bigger role. But they also brought in Trey Harris, who, his numbers are just ridiculous. 16 catches, 341 yards. That's 21.3 yards per catch. 6 touchdowns on only 16 catches. What are your thoughts on this new receiver core? It's not necessarily entirely new, but obviously those two guys have elevated, and you've added Trey Harris.
No, there's no doubt. Trey Harris is the answer to losing Mingo and Heath. And you factor in, Trey hasn't played in 2 ball games this year, so he's done all this stuff basically in 3 games because, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury situation. He's healthy now, much better now. And, I expect him to have a huge year. The question with Trey Harris was, would his productivity transfer from Louisiana Tech to the SEC? And so far, so good. I definitely keep an eye on the Dart to Harris connection Saturday night.
So Judkins had 33 carries for 100. I can't believe he carried the ball 33 times for 177 yards and a touchdown against LSU after kind of a slow start. And you'd kind of mention you think part of that is better blocking. What I think is interesting about Ole Miss's offensive line, and people are talking about this with Arkansas, like, they haven't recruited enough guys, or enough good guys. But like you look at Ole Miss's offensive line, there's a lot of veteran guys, but there's not a super recruit on the offensive line. I mean, what do you attribute to Ole Miss's success blocking, both protecting Dart because they don't give up a lot of sacks, and also paving the way for Judkins?
Yeah, can I say ass on this podcast?
You can say ass.
Listen, Lane Kiffin got in that ass after the Alabama game. Uh-huh. That's what I attribute it to. Kiffin, the O-line coach, John Garrison, they were honestly embarrassed after the Alabama game with the way the offensive line blocked. And, it made a world of difference Saturday night against LSU. And I think you can attribute that directly to Quinshon Judkins' success. I mean, look, he was running the ball against Mercer, Georgia Tech, Tulane, and everybody's like, what's wrong with Quinshon? This is not the same guy we saw run last year. Well, it really wasn't the same effort you were getting from the offensive line last year. So, Lane Kiffin and John Garrison, I think they sat down and they really read the riot act to these guys. And, it showed last Saturday night. Hopefully, for the Rebels' sake, that keeps up for another week.
Yeah, and Garrison in his first year in Oxford, also coming over from NC State. So Ole Miss seems like they're always in shootouts every time I watch them play. But what does Pete Golding like to do defensively, and how do you think that the Rebel defense matches up? And is there more to this defense than we can tell from just looking at the stats, which aren't exceptional?
I have known Pete since he was a senior at Hammond High School in Hammond, Louisiana. I was fortunate enough to cover him as a college player when he was playing at Delta State. And the one thing I know about Pete Golding is he's gritty, he's gutty, he's a fighter, and his guys are going to play just like him. Now, does he have all the pieces he'd like to have on that defense? No, he does not. But they're going to be a formidable foe. They had their moments against LSU. I mean, you look and they gave up 49 points, but they stood up when they had to. LSU was up by a couple of scores in that game. They got a couple of critical stops to let the offense get back in the game, and ultimately stopped LSU down on the goal line to win the ball game. So, I think Arkansas is going to get 11 guys on the field that are going to be in a mood to fight, and they're going to fight all night long, and not fight in that sense, but they're going to battle. They're going to battle all night long. There's no quit in a Pete Golding defense. It's going to be a year or two before he has all of the players that he wants on that defense to be able to execute things the way it's drawn up. But, five-star linebacker Centarian Perkins was a great start in the 23 class. He's got a commitment from five-star defensive lineman Cam Franklin in the 24 class. He's building it. And, I think he's got a bright future. And, hopefully Ole Miss will be able to hold on to him for a very long time, because there's improvement on the defensive side of the ball.
David Johnson joining us. Again, you can follow him at Rebels247 on Twitter. He's the Inside the Rebels publisher. I want to get you out with this. First of all, also, I think a lot of people would be surprised with how many good coaches have come out of Delta State. Like, people wouldn't predict that.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. It's great you bring that up, because you look around everywhere. Auburn's defensive coordinator, Ron Roberts, who was at Baylor with Dave Aranda, former Delta State head coach. The head coach at Rice, Mike Bloomgren, former Delta State offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach Mike Kershaw at Rice, former Delta State player. It's amazing at the number of and I say this because, look, Delta State is my alma mater. And, so I'm proud of the fact that they have produced so many outstanding coaches. And it's still a great program to this day in Division II.
Sure is. All right, David, dump out your tea leaves. How do you see things playing out on Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a shootout. Of course, Ole Miss fans are well aware of who KJ Jefferson is. He grew up 30 minutes from the Ole Miss campus in Sardis, Mississippi. And I remember covering his recruitment. And, Chad Morris was at Arkansas at the time, and he was quick to offer KJ. Ole Miss drug its feet. Phil Longo, who's now at Wisconsin, was the offensive coordinator here. And I'll just be honest, Longo didn't like him. He didn't think KJ computed to an SEC quarterback. Finally, Matt Luke, who was the head coach, went to Longo and said, "We're offering this kid, period." And they offered him, but KJ was well in the Razorbacks camp by then, and that was it. But I think KJ's going to come in here. He's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to have basically the whole town of Sardis, Mississippi, probably like all 1,200 people in the stands pulling for him and pulling for Arkansas. And I think it's going to be a shootout. I really do. I don't think it's going to be one of those 55-49 games. But, I see one team scoring in the 30s, one team scoring in the high 20s. And, that kind of game. And, Rocket Sanders is back for you guys. And, probably the two best running backs in the SEC, and Quinshon and Sanders going at it. But two pretty darn good quarterbacks too. I picked Ole Miss to win this thing 38-28. And with a margin of error of 15 points either way. So, we'll see what happens. But, right now it looks like Ole Miss has kind of garnered some momentum. And Arkansas, we follow the Hogs over here. Obviously, they've got some issues. More often than not, those issues kind of reveal themselves on Saturdays. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's going to be a heck of a ball game. I'll tell you this much. I don't think there is an Ole Miss fan in the world that thinks this is going to be easy. We're picking the Rebels to win. I think all three of us on our site picked Ole Miss to win this morning, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a blowout. And truth be known, it's Ole Miss, Arkansas. We know how close the games have been, with the exception of last year, for many seasons now. And this game could be just like that. Yeah,
last year definitely an outlier of a game. And to Ole Miss's credit with KJ, he wasn't like a farm-raised quarterback with a personal QB. He had a hitch in his throwing motion. He was a guy that was all potential and upside. I always thought it was interesting, with 24/7 Sports, just how good a job they did about, because he was a 4-star recruit and a guy that had a hitch in his throwing motion and needed a lot of development, but they 24/7 saw through it and ranked him 4 stars. And, Arkansas and Ole Miss both are doing fine at quarterback, so it worked out.
There's no doubt about it. And, if KJ come to Ole Miss, would he have beaten out Matt Corral? Would he have beaten out Jackson Dart? Arkansas was obviously the best choice for him, and he made it, and he's been successful. I know his high school coach. His high school coach is one of my best friends. And,
he's a good guy. I've talked to him a couple times. Yeah.
Carl Diffie is an excellent guy. He's out of coaching now, but still a great guy and an Ole Miss graduate. And I'm going to tell you, Diffie did the right thing. He was there for KJ when KJ needed him, but he never tried to steer him to Ole Miss, because I honestly think Ole Miss kind of ticked him off as well by not offering KJ. But and I've had KJ at my combines, my camps that I run in the summer times, and anybody that doubted what his abilities were going to be. They weren't looking at the right things. And you're right, he had a hitch in his throwing motion. But, I mean, you look at K.J. Jefferson and you go, okay, if he doesn't work out at quarterback, this cat could be an all-SEC tight end.
Yeah.
And you take him. You absolutely take him. And that's to Ole Miss's detriment that they didn't, because KJ's coming to town Saturday, and he'll have his game with him. I promise you, an A game.
All right, David. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
All right, Trey. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. That's David Johnson. Again, you can follow him at Rebels 24/7 on Twitter. He's the publisher of Inside the Rebels, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Does a great job over there for Inside the Rebels. If you want great internet service, then you should check out our friends at Ozarks Go. You can reach them at 479-684-4900. It's been a long time since I've been on the screen after our two guests. OzarksGo.net/Hawg. That's HAWG. I mean, what else is there to say about Ozarks Go that I haven't said? I mean, you just kind of keep your fingers crossed that they're available in your area. I know they're moving out, ever expanding. It is a local company. Again, if you call them, you're going to talk to somebody local. If you get Ozarks Electric, you probably can get Ozarks Go. I use the Multigig internet, which is lightning fast. It's instant. Gigabit is like that also. The Multigig gives you better bandwidth, is going to be a little bit more primed and optimized. The Multigig, I think, is going to be good for most families. They offer several different tiers. Great internet service from our friends at Ozarks Go. They'll have a couple of nice gentlemen come over and install it. They'll be in and out, and you're not going to have to worry about glitching in and out or any of that stuff, because they're going to test everything. Go reach out to them, OzarksGo.net/Hawg, HAWG, 479-684-4900, ever expanding. So just because you didn't have them available last year doesn't mean you don't have them available this year, especially if you're in Northwest Arkansas, parts of Missouri, and Oklahoma. OzarksGo.net/Hawg. We got some time for some questions. Before we get to that, one more time, last opportunity to sign up. 2 months for the price of one at HawgSports, HAWGsports.com. 50 cents a month for 2 months, 11 cents a week, 1.6 cents a day for unmatched Insider Razorback coverage, the best coverage that you're going to find out there. And I haven't even talked about the Razor's Edge message boards, which has been pretty lit lately. HAWGsports.com. Go check us out. All right, let's see if we got any good questions today. We got a lot of comments. Walk and Talk is going to be really sad again, says Bobby Hobson. It's supposed to be like a way for us to celebrate together and a way for us to have therapy together and just kind of talk it out, except for I'm the only one talking. Billy Harper says, Trey, do you think with the adjustments being made on the O-line will make a significant difference in this game? I think it will be better for Arkansas if Curtis can play center. First of all, Curtis has got to be good at center. I think Latham is a better option at tackle than what they've had, although he hasn't played that well this year, in my opinion. I think Limmer is an all-SEC guard who is a pretty average center, but he's an all-SEC guard. So I think that'll be a positive move, moving him back to where he played last year. I think that's the one thing that you can just look at and say, okay, you can count on this being a successful move. Latham at tackle, I think, is a better option than what they had. He's moving to the right side to be a right tackle. A way better option than Curtis. I think Curtis, I was talking with Randy Rainwater yesterday, and Randy was like, they're going to run, a nose guard, right, just head up right on him. Like, is he going to be able to handle that in a hostile environment? I think it's better than having a guy on his outside shoulder where, he just wasn't very effective. And Curtis is very young, 19 years old, just turned 19 in August. He's the youngest sophomore on the team. He's younger than, I think, 5 or 6 of the true freshmen on the team. That's how young Curtis is. Got a lot of ability and potential, just not ready to play on the edge, not against these guys that they see in the SEC on the edge. So, yes, I think it'll be better. Do I think it's like an answer like this is going to be huge? I don't know about that yet. Is it going to be better than it was? I think so. You don't want to ideally have to do that in the middle of the season. Bobby Hobson says they may lose 42-6. They're not going to lose 42-6. I mean, they're not going to see the defense that they saw last weekend. They've got some things to improve on. There's no question about that. But, if you should never compare scores, but we're going to do it anyway just because it's fans and media and it's fun, whatever. But, you look at what Arkansas did against against Ole Miss, or excuse me, against LSU, and you look what Ole Miss did against LSU. You know, Arkansas went to Baton Rouge to play them. LSU had to go to Oxford. I think that there's going to be points scored in this game. I think KJ is going to probably have a pretty solid game. I think you're going to see some better blocking. And, you know, Arkansas's defense creates takeaways. They weren't horrendous against Texas A&M. They just weren't. I mean, they definitely struggled in the second half against LSU. They played well the first half. They played well overall against BYU too. Go back and look at like how these points are being scored on Arkansas. You know, like last weekend, you had a punt return for a touchdown. You had a pick six. You had a failed 4th and 1. You know, I think there was maybe another turnover. There was something else that happened. But anyway, you know, really, when you look at it, you could really just attribute 13 points to the defense last weekend. And Texas A&M missed 2 field goals. You say 19 points. Maybe they could have punched it in or kicked a field goal there at the end, 22 points. I mean, it's not horrendous. I'm not saying like they're world beaters on defense. And they're going to have some problems against Ole Miss. Just about everybody. Alabama didn't, but just about everybody's going to have problems against Ole Miss. They're going to put up a lot of offense. They're also going to give up some, a lot on defense. So it's just kind of the way the game is. But it's not going to be 42-6. I always remember Neil McCready. He runs the Ole Miss site for Rivals. I've known him for years and years and years back when I was at Rivals. And he predicted when things were falling apart for Houston Nutt at Oxford, and Neil predicted 42-10. And there's this scene. There's a video of it out there somewhere. And Houston, after the game, they lost the game. I can't remember who it was to, maybe like Florida or something. But they lost the game. But it was a closer game. And Houston goes, he goes, I don't read your stuff, but one of my freshmen showed me what you wrote. Neil McCready predicted we're going to lose 42-10. Wasn't no 42-10. What you saw was some real effort out there. But every time I see Neil McCready, I'm like 42-10. Arkansas is not losing 42-6 Saturday. That's Bobby Hobson. Next time I see you, Bobby Hobson, wasn't no 42-6. Bobby Hobson said our line isn't good because the coaches are bad. Landon Montgomery says it's over. It's all over. Dalton Adams says, I'm extremely scared of their defense, but Pete Golding has been known to be an annoyance to offenses. This is a senior dividing game, must win. Their defense isn't great. Ole Miss. Yeah, I mean, like you lose this one, it's 4 straight losses. You talk about it gets easy to let go of the rope. It's 4 straight losses and you're headed to Alabama. It's 4 straight losses and you're headed to Alabama if they drop this one. It's 4 straight losses and they're headed to Alabama. Think about that. Do I need to say it again? 4 straight losses and headed to Alabama next. Whew. I mean, say that out loud. Thomas Clifton Elliott says, this is a season-defining game. That's why I just read that. Roddy Eugene Lambert says, an Ole Miss win will bring back some hope for Arkansas fans. Sure. A.B. Green says, I agree with what B. Bierman said about the football team. And we jump. Thanks, Facebook. I agree with what B. Bierman said about the football team on Monday. It should be the first choice of firings if we need to do it, and it should be the first choice of firing. I'm not sure what you're saying exactly there. Ronnie Jean Lambert says Hogs win against Ole Miss. Bo Ashmore says I came into the season predicting 9-3 at best and 7-5, the absolute worst based off the performance we've seen so far. I'm really scared we won't even get to a bowl game this year. The only win I'm 100% confident in the rest of the season is FIU. Yeah, you should be confident they could beat FIU. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I don't hate the talent on this team. I don't. I think, when you look at it, that KJ Jefferson doesn't just suck all of a sudden. There's a reason. Rocket Sanders, has been hurt also. But the problem for this team has been the offensive line, hands down. You can make an argument that, so-and-so isn't as good as you thought, or so-and-so is not pulling their weight, or so-and-so. It comes down to the offensive line for me. When I look at every single problem they have, and people say KJ's still holding the ball too long. Maybe he's done that a few times. But overall, just watch Arkansas's tackles in the last couple of games, especially last game. Just watch the tackles and tell me that everything's, everything else is a problem. Like, if you can't get protection for KJ, you're going to have a crappy offense. That's the bottom line. If you can't get protection for Jackson Dart, look what they did against Alabama. They couldn't protect him. They couldn't open running lanes. They scored 10 points. You got to have protection, and that's what all of it comes down. This defense is not horrendous. Now, they're gonna give up some points on Saturday. They just are. They're not horrendous, and they're certainly not as bad as they were last year. I don't hate Arkansas's receivers. I think they've got some good players there. They just can't get them open because he doesn't have time to throw, or he's worried about getting hit. And you hadn't had Rocket Sanders. Losing Lucas is a big blow for him on offense. I think that's obvious. But, man, so much of their problems come down to this offensive line just really being a struggle. And that was a problem that, I talked about making assumptions last week. But, like, if you would have told me year 4 with Sam Pittman and it's this and this and this, and they have an issue moving the ball, I wouldn't have told you it was because of the offensive line. I would tell you it's because of the lack of skill players or they don't have a good quarterback. That's what I would have told you. Never would have imagined that, even though there are new faces out there on the offensive line, that they wouldn't have things in order there. And that's been, that's been the reason people have been so upset and, pointing to reasons to make a change and all those kinds of things. I'm not on board with that. I think that they really made a huge error right there with the offensive line, with, I guess, assuming that these guys were going to be ready to go. And they're not. They're just not. But they're not facing Texas A&M and Texas A&M's defense on Saturday. They're facing Ole Miss's. Adam Green says, I heard there was a big fight at the movies in Dallas last Friday night. Does that spell deeper problems than what we think? I've not heard that. Cody Whoopig Sui Darius says, I personally don't see a lot of dogs. We need someone who can be that leader, hold the peers accountable. Do you see that person, especially on the offensive side? Do you agree? I think the offensive line is the problem with this team. I'm not saying, when I say the problem with this team in terms of getting to be like an 8-win team, the problem is the offensive line, in my opinion. You give them just last year's offensive line, and I don't think there's any question that this should be, an 8-win team or better, because they have a better defense than they had last year. Dalton Adams says, is the fire we saw from Pitt on Monday normal, or has he decided to get more aggressive in practice? No, I don't think that's any different. Maybe you're just paying attention more. I do think he said he wasn't going to do any more with the offensive line than he normally does, but in the 2 practices that were open Monday and Tuesday, he was with the offensive line the entire time, which is right next to the tight ends also. Tight ends have been a problem. I talk about the offensive line, tight ends have been a problem. They have Lucas, they don't have anybody else who can block. Not from what I've seen. I think it makes a lot of sense to move Dominic Johnson there. I think this game is very winnable, says Michael E. Ashcraft. Hogs win 38-37. Does Ozarks Go have wireless? Cell service? They're just internet. So if you need internet in your home, those are the people to call. Tell Ozarks Go to come to Mountain Home, says Chris Corley. You hear that, Ozarks Go? They want you in Mountain Home. David is a great interview. Enjoyed him. Yeah, he does. David had his son was an offensive lineman. He played center. This was back before pandemic. He played center at Ole Miss. I'm sure he had a lot of great insight back then. Bo Ashmore says the ingredients are on the table. We just can't seem to make the cake. I don't know if I think they may have run out of eggs. They may have run out of eggs. Eggs being the offensive line. All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. I want to thank David Johnson from Inside the Rebels for hopping on. Of course, Curtis Wilkerson, the insight he provides with basketball and football, also kind of does a little bit of everything. Appreciate all your questions, everybody. Thanks to our title sponsor, Ozarks Go, and all of our subscribers at HawgSports.com. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. Thanks for making us one of the elite, largest sites in the entire country, and I always take a lot of pride in that since we are an Arkansas company. Appreciate all of you. All right, everybody. Next time you see me, I'll be walking around, probably around the neighborhood or somewhere. Maybe I find a different spot. It's going to be late, but I'll be doing the walk and talk from here. We're going to have Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis. Maybe I'll give Andrew a call or something. I don't know. But we'll have them in Oxford covering the game from there. All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.